Welcome back to another AECN education lesson where we look at the key concepts in the Year 11 Science Acids and Bases External. In this video we are going to look at how and why atoms form bonds with other atoms and also the differences between covalent bonding and ionic bonding. Different atoms will form bonds with each other because they want to gain a full valence shell and become stable. The valence shell is the outermost shell, and for the very first shell, this can hold a maximum of 2 valence electrons, and for the other shells at year 11, they can hold 8 valence electrons. So to get a full outer shell of 2 electrons for the first shell and 8 for the others, atoms can either give electrons to another atom, they could take electrons from another atom, or they can share electrons with another atom. And what they do and how they get that full outer shell depends on the type of atoms involved. The periodic table can be broken up into metals and nonmetals. And on the periodic table in this picture, it's broken up along the dark green line of atoms. The metals are found on the left-hand side of the periodic table, and the nonmetals are found on the right-hand side or to the right of that dark green line of metals. The dark green zigzag line running between the metals and the nonmetals is called the metalloids. The metalloids are given their own name because they have properties in common with both the metals and the nonmetals. So how the atoms interact to gain that full outer shell depends on the type of atoms involved. So metals generally give their electrons to nonmetals, whereas nonmetals can either take electrons from metals or they can share their electrons with other nonmetals. Ionic bonding involves a metal atom giving their electrons to a non-metal. When the metal gives its electrons away, it still has the same number of positive protons, but it's lost negative electrons. So this leaves the metal with a positive charge because it has more positive protons than negative electrons. Whereas when the non-metal takes the electrons, it still has the same number of positive protons, but it's gained extra negative electrons. So it then has a negative charge. And so the ionic bonding occurs because the positive ions from the metal are attracted to the negative ions from the non-metal. And what happens is each positive metal ion is surrounded by negative non-metal ions, and each non-metal ion is surrounded by positive metal ions. And this is the ionic bond, that attraction between the positive and the negative ions. When we write the ionic formula, we're writing the simplest ratio of positive ions to negative ions. So for salt or sodium chloride, it's NaCl. That means for every 1 sodium, there is 1 chloride, but each sodium ion is surrounded by multiple chlorides and vice versa. And it forms what's called a 3D lattice. That just means a solid that extends in 3 directions. You can see a picture of this in the top right corner. The 3D network of ions is called an ionic compound. Covalent bonds occur when 2 or more nonmetals interact. And so when nonmetals interact, they share their electrons. So the electrons spend some of their time around one atom, some of their time around the other atom, but the majority of their time in between the 2 atoms. So both atoms, by sharing the electrons, have a full outer shell and are stable. The sharing of electrons forms a covalent bond. And all the atoms involved in that covalent bonding, or sharing the electrons, together are called a molecule. So for example, water, or H2O, is made up of oxygen and hydrogen atoms sharing their electrons, and that H2O is called a molecule. If you are finding these videos helpful and you want to stay up to date with when new ones are released, you can click on that subscribe button below, or you can follow us over on Instagram. A link to our Instagram account is down below.